Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. All right, just as a quick reminder for anyone joining us for the first time today, this is the Student Success District Network hosted by the Grad Partnership for Student Success. The Grad Partnership for Student Success is a collaboration of about a dozen organizations now working to help further implementation of high quality student success systems across the country. So, as always, the student success system framework and the four components or elements of that system kind of help organize and ground what we do here in the network. And actually, today's session and our March theme are about the people who make the framework happen. So, about the practices that our teams engage in. And how to use improvement science to take the work that you already have that's ongoing and look at how to integrate that work specifically for a student success system approach. We're joined today by Sheena Lal, who I will hand everything over to in a second. Just a quick summary for everyone. Again, the network is intended to foster peer-to-peer interaction and learning between district student success teams. We set up topics related to your areas of implementation and interest and create these sessions and related resource bundles to support implementation in those areas, furthering the dialogue around student success systems and helping to support your implementation. All right, today's session agenda, we are going to be looking at a team process tool. There are 7 steps to this tool. So what we're doing is breaking it in half. So that's why there's the little circle in the middle there. Sheena's going to talk a little bit about the first several steps of the tool. We're going to have some time for discussion and reflection on those first couple steps. Then we'll come back and do the same thing with the second part of the tool before we close out for today. Your facilitators for today, I am Marie Husby Slater. I am the coordinator for the Student Success District Network here at Grad Partnership, and I am joined today by the lovely Sheena Lal, Associate Director at Johns Hopkins University School of Education, with also the Grad Partnership. Is again, as I mentioned, this is meant to be a peer community and an engaging collaborative community, and so as such, we do have these norms for engagement that we bring into all of our sessions. We'll just pause for a second here to give everyone a chance to review them. I won't read them or anything. And then we'll go ahead and jump into kind of setting the stage for today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Marie. And thank you to everyone who is here today. We really appreciate the educators' time. So we just want to start with some important contextual information, and that is that we know that your district teams are already working in wonderful ways to support students. And this process that we are going to discuss today, the framework is just to help with efficiency and provide some options moving forward. So I'm going to describe a little bit of work that we did with District 3 in New York City, and hopefully you can consider how this approach fits with your current team. And the point of today is that you would be thinking through what is already in place, what strengths you have, and looking for opportunities for improvement and alignment within your teams. Thank you. So we are going to be doing the first 3 steps in the process tool. Student success systems involve many things. And so we sat down together and we thought we were going from 4 schools to 16 schools. And next year we will be in 28 schools. How do we scale this? Like, how do we make a process that school leaders or student success team leads can follow and everyone can do it together at the same time? What's important to also know, although we will go through this in a linear fashion, this process is not a linear process. The first step is really thinking about the holistic data views. And if you are a part of student success systems already, you know that we love our holistic data. And so when we're looking at data from students, we want to know, where do lots of students need support? Our holistic data views really mean that we're looking at the whole student. The research-based indicators of attendance, behavior, and course performance have been around for a long time, and post-COVID research showed us that looking at a student's agency, belonging, or connectedness to a school building is really an important factor as well. And so we hope to put views together where school teams can look at attendance, behavior, course performance, and some measure of well-being to find groups that need extra support. When we ask our school teams to analyze the data, we looked for trends, patterns, or some relationships. And basically, for a long time, the attendance team had been looking at attendance, the wellness team had been looking at behavior, and we are asking teams to really think about ways that we can look at attendance and behavior and course performance all together and consider the whole child. And so when we asked schools to target groups, we said perhaps you are looking for groups of students, for example, who are flagging for chronic absenteeism and also failing courses. And that way we could narrow down a group of students by using any of these predictive indicators. And I think something that we learned was that it was probably easier for schools to have just one data analysis protocol that the district gave them to use so that all schools were speaking the same language when looking at the data views. The second thing that we think is important for district teams to consider are what ways you can integrate data systems to make this process easier. I know that there are people on this call who already know that it might be very difficult to get that type of information all together. We had to figure out before we even started, how are we going to present data to our team in a way that they can understand it and analyze it so that we get some results. So our first step is to take a look at data and try to narrow down a specific set of students that we would love to help. Our second step is to look at a root cause analysis. And the question that your team is asking yourself here is simply, what are the actionable reasons that this is occurring in the data? Really important for us, making sure that we speak to the students or the staff or the parents or the caregivers who are involved in the data. So you must hear from the actual people who are identified in your data to determine their true root cause. So if you are going to choose something like the 5 whys, doing that with just your staff may not be as fruitful as if you did that with the students in the room or the parents in the room. The suggested ways to perform a root cause analysis are listed here, but at the end of the day, the goal is that you are just trying to solicit the voice of students, staff, parents, caregivers, and the community. One example is that a school noticed that there was not a lot of strong supportive relationships between students and adults in the building, and they wanted to make a change, and so they started to pull down groups of students who were flagging for behavior and attendance to start asking them questions about why they were flagging in these areas. So when we choose a root cause to address, we have to think about the timing, the bandwidth, the schedule, the resources, the level of impact, and our locus of control. Another example would be a school that was trying to address the issue of attendance. When talking to students, they found that transportation was an issue, but it was not something that was within their locus of control. There were students who said that they came late or they were absent due to social anxiety. And that is something that felt much closer to the team as something that they could control within their building. And so when you are choosing a root cause to address, for example, if you are doing an intervention related to attendance, you really want to think about, what can my team handle right now? How many people are on my team? Do we have testing coming up? Do we have the resources that we might need? And what is the level of impact that we can have on our student body with this intervention? Here are some tips that we've learned for your district team. Consider a district-wide data bank of potential root cause questions. For our teams, it was very much like, okay, now we want you to go out and find out why students are not coming to school, or find out why, we're failing classes, or perhaps why parents are saying they don't feel like they belong to the community of the school. But teams also said, well, this is taking a lot of time. And so it was really helpful for us as a grad partnership partner to sit down with the district and say, hey, what are some questions that we would ask across the board so that any school that says, hey, I'm looking at students that are flagging for behavior can ask. And so what we did was we created a district-wide data bank, and then schools went in, they either chose the questions they wanted or they added their own questions for a root cause analysis. And now that district has a really wonderful and robust potential question bank for root cause analysis. Something else that was really helpful was thinking about the ways that the district could support schools with root cause analysis when it came to family and caregiver input. So we did have a couple schools that identified things like lateness or absences that were really more family when it came to elementary school. So it was more of how do we help this family get their student here on time? And we needed to hear from families at that point. And something that was very difficult was actually getting responses from families. And so we want to think about ways that a district might be able to support schools in getting some input from families. Now, the third step is the most fun step, in my opinion. Once you've decided what root cause analysis you would like to address, you want to think about how can we help many students this year. But post-COVID, the number of students that needed help in schools flipped. And it was so many that a team looking at just one student would not have the impact that we really needed to make change. And so now we are starting to think of groups of students, which is why you look at the data to identify a group. When we look at the design thinking process here that comes from Stanford University, it starts with empathizing. And in student success systems, we do that through our root cause analysis. That is where we are seeking to understand the true problem. And then the defining stage is the stage where we decide the root cause that we want to address. So what is the actual challenge? The challenge is that students do not feel like adults really care about them in the building. And how do we come up with great ideas to make that change? And so we step into ideating, prototyping, and testing. And we bring the same students back, or we bring the parents back. The people that we spoke to for our root cause, we want to hear more from. We want to hear their solutions to their problems. And so we bring them back and we ask very pointed questions. Part of what the team did was sit down and design questions that they wanted their students or their parents or their staff members to answer. Coming up with ideas with the people that are being impacted is probably one of the most important parts of this process. After you get all their ideas, the team would look, and we had a school where students were coming late, and the kids said, "We're late because we are getting our bacon, egg, and cheeses at the deli in the morning. So if you just put the bacon, egg, and cheese truck in our yard, then we'll be on time." And so students have great ideas always, but some of them we cannot follow through with. But there are other ideas that students come up with that you as a team go through after your design thinking session and say, hey, we would like to really focus in on this. And that for some schools included a school that is setting up a safe space in every room where kids can stay and calm down if they're feeling upset. We have a school that started a kind of playroom off the side of the lunchroom so that students who are either transferred in late to the building or specifically came from a different school and may not know the language can interact with each other. And so far, they're seeing great progress. The idea is that you would prototype. You stop for a little bit of time and you try it. So we had a school that identified that there were students and they wanted them to feel welcome. And so what they did was they picked just 7 students and they had language translating devices. And then the person at the front door would ask something that made the student feel like they saw them and they cared for them. And they trialed it first with 7 students, and those students would come back and report to the team about how they felt. And then after 6 months, they recognized this is so good that we should do this with many other types of student groups. So they tested it and they realized it was really helpful. We don't want to just go off the ideas of students. Even though we love them and they are great, it is really important to also look at evidence-based interventions that can be combined with or that can back up what students are saying they would like to see. And so your team can choose to do this in any order. You guys can say, we see a problem with attendance. We're going to use this evidence-based intervention. And we'll hear from our students, or we'll hear from our students, and then we'll look at some evidence-based interventions. So we tried to do both in most cases and make sure that students not only felt their voices were heard, but that we brought research and evidence into interventions. Tips for the district include considering training sessions or modeling sessions for your schools if you're going to do human-centered design or whatever you choose as student voice. We found that some schools were pretty nervous about asking students what they thought. It is not always the most common thing, so we wanted to make sure that we were very supportive of them. And we also found that a lot of students were not really used to being asked what they think. And so it was also helpful to have us in the room or some other way to help your teams feel supported. And the second thing to do is consider resources and interventions that may be already successfully established within your district. So those are just the first three steps of our process.
Thank you, Sheena. That was a lot.
Sorry.
So we're going to take a minute to go into some breakouts and give y'all a chance to kind of dig into that a little bit more. Before we do, I just want to pause real quick on a couple of things. One, like part of what's really important and impactful about this work is that while the meat of it is taking place in school teams, there's also this strong and important role at the district to understand what's happening at schools and be ready and able to support them. So much of what Sheena just shared was about how the district worked with the schools to understand and address their individual challenges as the schools were going through implementing this same team process. And so with that in mind, we know that um, you know, the network is really intended to engage the district audience. And so we want to take a second to make sure we're focused in on what it looks like when district teams are engaging in these steps, so that we're looking at and considering the team implementation at the district level, right? As the district is implementing student success system teaming processes, engaging in those holistic data processes, doing their own root cause analysis and design thinking. And then the second part of that, which Sheena gave so many great examples of, is looking at how to support the school teams through the process, addressing barriers to school implementation, creating opportunities for collaboration, and filling in potential support gaps. Um, but here, the district is really setting that tone for improvement process and student success system implementation and creating expectations across the district. So as you are taking this back to your work in your teams, a couple of questions up here to help you think about kind of situating this within your ongoing work. Um, what can you celebrate in the process that you're already doing related to things like data analysis, root cause analysis, and engaging in student voice and human-centered design practices? And based on what you learn there, then what can you change? What can you look at leveraging, at adjusting to then see greater impact in the future? And so then with that, Sheena, I think if you want to go ahead to the next slide. All right, I'm going to, in just a second, open up a couple of breakout rooms so everyone can go, and we'll take about 10 minutes to have a brief discussion where you're going to, as an individual, choose the step in the process that resonates most with you, and then talk about that with your fellow small group mates who will each pick their own. So think about how your district or team engages in this step and how you support individual schools and school teams as well. So in just a second, you'll see a notice to go to breakouts, and we will come back together just so everybody has an idea about time in just about 12 minutes. All right, and here we go. All right, I think we've got everyone coming back from breakout. So thank you everyone for participating in that little break and discussion. As you come back, I've dropped a question in the chat. What is one idea, strategy, or practice you learned from someone else in your breakout? So if you want to just go ahead and drop that response in the chat as we move on to the last 4 steps in our team process.
Steps 4 through 7 of the process tool really follow improvement science and the idea of the PDSA cycle. So once we get our ideas and we decide what our intervention is, the next step is strategic action planning. Step 4 is why, who, and with what supports. So why are we doing this intervention? Who is going to help us with this intervention? And with what supports can we make this happen? And as I just said, when we are planning, we are really now following the plan, do, study, act cycle. So, the first thing we asked our teams to do was to set a goal for their intervention, including some kind of realistic growth and a timeline. And so, I'll give you an example. I had a school that said we want to grow our graduation rate by 50%, but they had not looked into the two previous years to see how high their graduation had increased, and it was only like 5 and 10%. So, if we are setting a goal that is like much larger than what can be realistically done, we might be setting our team up for some sort of failure, and we don't want to do that. So, as we are thinking of our goal, we want to be very realistic with both the growth and the timeline. The second step in planning the intervention that has been proving to be a little bit difficult for our teams right now is the idea of determining exactly how and when you will measure success. Quantitative and or qualitative measures can both work. And so we're seeing a lot of schools kind of try to figure out how to test their interventions, and what they are doing is coming up with like individual surveys that they can use specifically for the intervention, or they are tying it back to that sense of belonging, or they're saying we're going to look at reading levels if it's an academic intervention. So that's a really important step that I think schools really need district support and help with determining. Lastly, who will do it? What will they do? Where will they do it? When will they do it? Why will they do it? And how will they do it? And these are really important questions. And we really want to have much more detail involved in how we are being strategic about planning our intervention. So, it can be really helpful to use something like an implementation plan template that includes some things like who would be responsible for the action, the deadline for the action, maybe what potential barriers you might encounter, and how you would plan to move past your barriers. And so in the chat, we will drop just a link to a sample, but consider creating that document as a district for teams to use to plan and track their interventions. It's been extremely helpful for me and the district representative to be able to go back to each school's plan and say, on this day, you said you were going to do that. How did that work out for you? Consider also how you can sit with teams to help them think through their intervention plans. Often teams say, oh, well, we're going to make sure that students are doing this. And then we want to like help prompt them to like, how are they going to do that? And when will they find out about it? And if that person that is responsible is absent one day, how will you keep the program going? And so it's really important in the very beginning for you to be planning alongside your teams. The next step is how do we build awareness and buy-in through communication? We have seen interventions that take a long time and effort just fall apart because someone didn't know. Families didn't know they were supposed to show up. Students didn't even realize that it was happening in the building, or staff was not bought in and supporting the implementation. And so what we really want to do is consider carefully with your team, not only who will do it, but who will communicate it, who needs to know about it, what would they need to know, how would you do it, how often would you do it. So some schools have morning announcements, and that's how they get their students to know things, or they have blasts of newsletters, or what is the type of communication that you know your parents and students interact with the most. Would you have data displays physically in the building so that if I'm walking through, I can see this intervention happening right on your wall? Or is there a system for feedback? If I started an intervention and I would like to communicate, is there a place where staff members can say, hey, this is really disruptive to my second period class, or any kind of feedback that you have from family, from staff, or from students? We have to consider carefully how we will communicate what we really want others to know about our plan. So district considerations include considering policies or sources for informing students, parents, and caregivers about the community, about the interventions, and consider how the district can make those plans transparent and accessible. So if we have a plan and I want to know a little bit more about it, where can I get that information? Our next step is measuring and monitoring. And all we're asking here is, how do we know if this is working? There are two things that we have to check for. The first is implementation fidelity. We might say, is this intervention working? No, there are not more students coming on time, but we kind of have to pause first and take a look at our team. Was our team able to do what they said they would do? And were they able to do it when they said they would do it? I don't know about you guys, but we just had terrible snow season. And so for many of our teams, implementation was delayed because we had blizzard and snow days. And so we had to consider why or why not things were not moving in the correct direction and change, make changes that supported our needs based on whatever was stopping our teams from doing what they needed to do. And so it's really important before we get to, is this intervention working? Are we actually implementing with fidelity? Yes or no? Once you feel like you've decided what you need to change or how you can support implementation, we kind of dive into the actual intervention and think about what should we start doing, what should we stop doing, and what should we continue doing. And this is just one protocol for measuring and monitoring. And so once our teams had their plans made, we simply said, hey, what's going well? What's not going so well, and what do you think we should keep as we move forward? And so we've seen lots of teams kind of make small changes. Like, okay, we used to have students walk into the room and tell us how they were doing. It was taking too long. We now have a form on, the students' Google Classroom that they can fill out so we get their feedback. Small things to big things, like, hey, we were taking these students out of second period and we realized that they're missing way too much of their second period class. We're going to change the schedule for the intervention. So you have a moment to sit back and say, is this getting to the goal that we really were hoping for? And tips for the district team include considering scheduling time to support schools in measuring and monitoring follow through. One of our biggest obstacles, I would say, has been the idea of actually following through on the plan. And these teams, they've put so much time and effort, and their students have been so excited to share ideas and say, like, wow, we're really making a change. It's so important that we actually follow through with our interventions. And for the district, it's so important that we figure out ways that we can actually support schools in making that happen. And then we have to consider how the district can make data accessible and easily presentable for schools. So this week we are actually meeting with each team, looking at their measurement of success and figuring out how the district representative can actually be helpful in creating data. So there was one intervention. They were trying to get students to volunteer answers and participate more in class. And they were keeping track of how many times specific students spoke in a class. But the spreadsheet came out pretty like confusing to look at. And now the district representative is just going to help make that data easily presentable for the school to look at. Finally, we really want to celebrate and recognize. So the question here in this last 7 step is, what should be celebrated? It is very often that we have small wins along the way and we don't stop to think this is amazing, right? Like, I have a school that did 4 weeks of an intervention. I said to that student success lead, like, hold on a second, you just did a full month of an intervention. Let's take a minute to celebrate that. And so for each small win a team can feel, you would create a sense of progress, some positive energy, and it would propel a team towards some larger goals. And so we want to really allow our team times to reflect on their performance and the ways that they are making a difference in the school. And then we want to recognize the efforts, because some things may or may not work, but being able to recognize effort is a way to effectively shift mindsets. And I would say one of the most satisfying parts of doing student success systems is seeing adults say, like, I never thought about it this way, or it was so wonderful to listen to students and hear parents say, I didn't feel like the school listened to me before, but now I know that my voice is important. And having that shift into an optimistic mindset is one of the most important parts of a student success system. So for the district team, considering ways that you can help provide time and resources for celebrating wins and recognizing efforts is important. We just asked some team members how they would like to be celebrated, and we tried to brainstorm all of like the free things we could offer. And like, surprisingly, everyone was just like, we'd really love that like certificate with a signature on it. We offered a couple other things, but that was the most popular. And also consider celebrating and recognizing teams in district spaces so others can feel motivated. At the end of this year, we are going to have our teams present at the principals district meeting so that all the principals can see across the district all of the different initiatives that have been started through student success systems within their own district. And that can help other schools feel motivated to join or even help them see their own potential with student success systems. Okay, those were our final steps in the process tool.
Great. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in. 7 steps feels like a lot.
Yes.
Um, and as we're wrapping that and moving into our second and last discussion for today, kind of like my big point is I want to circle back to where Sheena started, which is like this is building on what you already have, right? And it is about making it fit in the process and structure that makes sense for you, not necessarily rearranging everything you do so that it follows these 7 steps exactly, right? So we want to look at how to do this realistically and reasonably so it's propelling you into the future. And always love celebrating those small implementation wins along the path. So I'm going to spend less time here than I did last time. Is the same setup as the previous slide, right? For district considerations. We're going into these breakouts. We're reflecting on what it looks like for the district team to do this work. These last 4 steps in the process, the PDSA cycles, monitoring implementation, celebrating examples of success. I forgot action steps. The action, that's the really important one. Do not forget your action steps. I'm sorry I did. And again, looking at these 4 steps, what can you celebrate that's already in place? How can you leverage that? And what can you look at to change or adjust in order to improve and do have a greater impact with less effort in the future? So with that, if you want to go ahead to the breakout slide, thank you. Same plan as before. In just a second, you'll see those breakout rooms. So we're starting to come up against the end of our time together. So I'm just dropping same reflection question in the chat. If you want to just take a few seconds and share one idea, strategy, or practice that you learned from someone else in your breakout group. And I also want to thank everybody who has stayed with us through this entire session. Um, we hope that you found the discussion worthwhile and you're taking something back to your team that will be useful to you in your implementation. If Sheena, you want to go ahead to the next slide. As always, in follow-up to today's session, you will be receiving our theme snapshot that summarizes the team practices theme, next steps you can take with your team when you get all of this back after today, and related resources. We're also, in addition to the resources for today's session, adding into that the snapshot from our November theme, which was focused on the 6 principles of improvement science with Carnegie Foundation. And so we started out early in the year looking at is this higher level improvement science design? What does that look like? And today really dug more into some of the practical application of, okay, how do I take that and use it with my team and connect it with student success systems? And so then next steps, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, Sheena, hopefully you can take something back from those practice steps and reflection to your whole team. And we will continue to move through this student success system reflection and topics over the next three months. Before I wrap this up all the way, I do want to say thank you, Loretta, for sharing in the chat the different, using communication plans. Communication is so important, and it's a piece where I think we often go into communication planning and implementation with the best intentions, and it's so easy to drop those plates. So I really appreciate bringing that up here. If you look, we have, as I said, 3 months left in our 25-26 network plan. Um, April, May, and June. And just as we started early in the year, back in November, with that high level improvement science principles, really looked at the application of that today. When we look ahead to the next few months, we're looking at integrating post-high school transition supports and student success work, data visualizations for collaboration and action. So more details on how to move these steps forward. And finally, in June, taking that last step of celebrations and to celebrate the first year of the district network, we'll be engaging in some conversation and collaboration on how to identify those implementation wins along the way and how to communicate them and use that to help build that buy-in and momentum going forward. So with that, we are right at our end time. Thank you again, everyone. We appreciate your time today and continuing to join in with us, and we can't wait to see you next month. And thank you, Sheena, for
Thank
sharing
you.
your work today and joining us.